The purpose of BuildBPS is to start a new chapter of construction and renovation in the Boston Public Schools over the next decade and beyond. With 2/3 of Boston schools constructed before World War II, it is imperative that we embark upon a plan that modernizes our buildings in a way that best facilitates 21st century learning. BuildBPS is comprised of two components, a written report and a web-based data visualization tool. Both can be found at buildbps.org. BuildBPS compiles vast amounts of data and allows for ongoing analysis to guide and inform decisions related to school building investments. BuildBPS is designed to be a living document and evolving process, adapting and growing with the city and its neighborhoods. To be successful, the process will rely on continuous, meaningful input from and engagement with the community. Participation from parents, staff, students, and other stakeholders was a crucial component in the development of this first report. It is equally important to sustain and deepen that engagement moving forward. In response to a recommendation from the BuildBPS report, the city and Boston Public Schools are creating a $13 million 21st Century Fund. While new schools and renovations take time to get started, there are many things we can do right now to provide our students with better spaces and tools for learning. This fund will be used to make immediate investments across all BPS schools over the next year. Currently, BPS is working with school leaders to create a menu of tools and investments from which each school will be able to choose. Mayor Walsh has committed $1 billion towards BuildBPS. There is an unprecedented $730 million that will come from the city's annual general obligation bond issues, and the rest will come from the city's growing relationship with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We are also exploring additional funding opportunities to support this effort.
Hello, I'm Ron Dorsey, Chief of Education for the City of Boston.
Hello, I'm Monica Roberts, Assistant Superintendent of Engagement for the Boston Public Schools.
Hi, I'm John Hanlon, Chief of Operations for Boston Public Schools. What we're going to be presenting right now is an overview of BuildBPS. The BuildBPS report is the culmination of an 18-month process to understand Boston's demographic trends, available school building capacity, the conditions of each building in the system, opportunities for immediate and long-term investment. It also offers the most complete set of data and most powerful set of tools that BPS has ever had for capital projects. It also provides a guide for investing the initial $1 billion that the mayor has pledged to school building improvement in Boston over the next 10 years. The charge to BPS, relevant city departments, and BPS stakeholder communities is to leverage this report to develop a shared understanding of the state of the BPS building portfolio and of Boston's evolving context, to identify short and long-term opportunities to modernize school buildings that align with BPS's vision for education, locate 21st century resources where families need and can most easily access them, and that better connect schools to opportunities beyond the classroom. Today, we begin the process of establishing the shared understanding of key data needed for effective decision-making and framing the types of discussions we will need to have and decisions that will need to be made to modernize BPS's school building portfolio. This is an outline of today's presentation, which the three of us will be delivering to each of you. We'll start by clarifying what the report is and what it is not. There have been many things expected of this report. We want to make certain that we establish clear expectations and clarify the intended uses for this report and the project itself over the next 10 years. As noted earlier, this report establishes the clearest vision for learning that the district has articulated. This is a vision that we will come back to in many policy and practice discussions over the next 10 years. This vision will help us to understand how we will approach learning environments and new building construction in new and innovative ways over the next 10 years. After discussing the educational vision that's laid out in the BuildBPS report, we'll be talking to you about a few things that we've learned through the report and the many data points that we found. After that, we'll talk about some of the long-term citywide planning considerations that will be part of the report and the project itself over the next 10 years. And we'll close with a deep overview of community engagement, which we believe will form the foundation of BuildBPS over the next 10 years. What BuildBPS is. We want to make sure that this is very clear from the beginning. What BuildBPS is a collection of an unprecedented amount of data organized in a usable, updatable system. An array of data that the district has never had at its disposal to make informed decisions before. There's also a list of 10 planning principles that we'll be implementing citywide over the next 10 years, but not before 5 immediate actions have taken place. These immediate actions in the form of investments will be felt in every school community across Boston. Last 2 points. BuildBPS is an initial guide for community engagement decision making, but at its core, BuildBPS is all about community engagement, something that the district will feel deeply over the next decade. And lastly, and most importantly, BuildBPS lays the foundation for investing $1 billion in our school buildings over the next 10 years. What BuildBPS is not is a list of specific project recommendations or a list of school closures. It is not an evaluation of instructional or program quality, and it's not going to tell us everything that needs to happen over the next 10 years. We live in a dynamic, constantly evolving environment here in Boston. We believe that to have laid out an exact blueprint for how the district is going to look 10 years from now would have been a mistake. We need to learn from the community and take those community discussions into our work with BuildBPS in order to make decisions that are not only informed by the wealth of data that BuildBPS provides, but also by the input we seek to receive from the community. As mentioned before, one of the cornerstones of BuildBPS is a set of immediate investments that will be felt in every school community across Boston. One of the hallmarks of this work is the 21st Century Schools Fund, through which we seek to equip all of our schools with the best tools so that we can begin to experience what the educational vision laid out in BuildBPS will feel like. While pushing forward with the 21st Century Schools Fund, we will also take opportunities to launch prototype projects, new classroom creations, and the like, so that we can use these spaces to learn from and spark discussion. While some of that innovative work is going on, we will of course continue the capital project repair cycle that marks much of our work across school building facilities year in and year out. And lastly, through that repair cycle, we will continue to work closely with the Massachusetts School Building Authority through its Accelerator Repair Project program, so that through FY18 and beyond, we will continue to make immediate investments in school buildings where they are most needed.
Over the long term, if we're going to modernize Boston Public School buildings, we need to make sure that they are aligned with the ways that we want to teach and learn. So the BuildBPS plan includes a vision for teaching and learning as well as for our spaces in school buildings. The BPS educational vision also builds on the school committee strategic vision, BPS's 100-day plan, its strategic implementation plan, our high school redesign principles, and a growing body of literature on both effective pedagogy and space design. This slide shows you the components of our educational vision that will guide the way that we teach and learn going forward. We intend for all learning experiences to be rigorous and cognitively demanding. We want them to be differentiated and to promote equitable and full access to the BPS curriculum. We want them to be cross-disciplinary, so no longer will we silo ELA, math, engineering, and other subjects. We'll bring them together in creative ways that reinforce learning. Learning should be multimodal, multi-channel, and technology-enabled. We know that students are working on multiple screens, multiple devices, and in multiple ways. We want to take advantage of technology and the tools that we have at our disposal. Learning should demand collaboration among all school community members. Teachers should be collaborating with one another. Students should be collaborating with one another, and certainly our faculty and students should be collaborating more often. We want learning to be expansive and inclusive of a wide variety of learning opportunities beyond the classroom. Boston is a place that is rich with youth-serving nonprofits, cultural institutions, colleges, and universities. We want to access all of those spaces to bring learning to life in our schools. Lastly, we want to make sure that learning promotes cultural and linguistic sustainability. The learning experience should support and reflect the great diversity of our students and faculty in BPS. Space has to reflect the way that we intend to learn. On this slide, you will see a set of guiding criteria for us to think about how space should be configured in our school buildings. First of all, space should be flexible. We should be able to move furniture, move walls to accommodate the activities that we want to conduct, and to give students the spaces that they need to learn. Our spaces should be sensory spaces, allowing for calming spaces as well as spaces of high activity. We should make sure that those spaces live under the same roof and in some very logical ways in our school buildings. We want our spaces to be contextual spaces, again, reflecting the diversity of our schools, where our students come from, and their backgrounds. Of course, it should go without saying that our school spaces should be safe spaces. We want students and faculty to be and to feel protected in all of our spaces. Lastly, we want to make sure that our school building spaces are spaces that can be networked. We can connect them to our college and university spaces, business spaces, and nonprofit spaces to enhance learning in some ways that make sense and help us extend learning beyond the school building. Demographic analyses suggest that Boston's overall population is growing at a considerable rate. Even over the course of the economic downturn, the city's overall population grew by 3.6% and is expected to grow from 640,000 residents at present to 724,000 residents by 2030. Data also suggests that Boston's fastest growing population segments are older age cohorts. Overall growth in the number of children and youth is not expected to keep pace with the rate of growth among adults and older adults in Boston. Boston's population, generally speaking, is an aging population. Boston's school-age population will grow by about 10,000 students over the next decade, while we will see a roughly 5 times increase in the rate of growth among adults in the city. The implication is that we expect to see flat to very modest growth in BPS enrollment over the next 10 years. Our demography team estimates a 0.4% per year increase in the number of students, or 2,500 students over the next decade. A number of factors influence the direction of our enrollment trends, including birth rate and BPS's capture rate. We will need to continue to update these data over time to understand what is influencing our enrollment rates and which directions they're moving. While we expect the number of children in BPS enrollment to grow only modestly over the next 10 years, we do have to pay attention to certain neighborhoods and subpopulations as we plan where we upgrade and locate schools. Currently, 59% of BPS students live in 4 neighborhoods: Dorchester, East Boston, Mattapan, and Roxbury. This is a pattern that is likely to continue, and it is likely that the concentration of children in the city and among BPS enrollees will grow over the next decade. As such, we need to consider that priority focus will need to be placed on these neighborhoods as we consider where to build and expand schools and where to locate schools, academic, and support programs. The chart on the right highlights a trend that is counter to the overall narrative about population growth in Boston. On the previous slide, we discussed the overall trend that Boston adult cohorts are the fastest growing age segments in Boston. When we look at the data by race, this is not consistent. Latino and African American youth populations under the age of 18 are expected to grow at 2 to 3 times the rate of their white and Asian counterparts. Again, we need to anticipate increasing access to modern school facilities where the most children will live in Boston, and we will need to consider increasing access to important programs, particularly if we anticipate, for example, growth in the population of ELL students in the district. Part of the BPS analysis also tried to capture a more accurate calculation of building capacity across the district. There is no one way to estimate and calculate building capacity, so we used 2 methods for this analysis. First, we calculated a current use capacity. Current use really represents the way BPS uses its buildings now, configures its classrooms, and accesses its spaces. If we think about students facing the front of the room, the way that we're orienting desks, where teachers work, how they work in their classrooms and collaborative spaces, we think that we have capacity for 69,100 students in the district. When we go back to the educational vision and think about the ways that we want to teach and learn, we view capacity very differently. We'll have to expand many of the spaces to allow for flexibility and to allow for there to be multiple activities in our spaces over the course of the day. We may need to think about new kinds of spaces that combine art, maker spaces, and other spaces that are becoming more prevalent in the learning program. When we take a look at how we think we will want to learn over the next decade or so, our estimates about capacity shrink to about 55,000. This is close to the current population of our school district, and we will have to think about our opportunities for expanding space in some ways that will allow all of our students to have 21st century learning spaces that enable our learning objectives and also create the spaces that the educational vision discusses. One of the core components of our analysis was an analysis of building conditions. As we've said many times, 65% of our buildings were built before World War II, so it was long overdue for us to do a thorough review of the conditions of all of our buildings. In this review, we looked at 4 areas of the building's viability. First of all, we looked at facilities, the bricks and mortar, the edifice of the building and its viability. Secondly, we looked at the site, the lighting, the parking lots, the playgrounds, the things around the building on the property. Third, we looked at the effectiveness of the environment, thinking about the acoustics, the lighting in the school. And lastly, we looked at the effectiveness of the space for teaching and learning. Is there enough room for students and faculty to do the work that they're doing and to learn in the ways that we want to learn in our school spaces? On this slide, you will see some of the headlines from that analysis. First of all, if we look at our elementary schools, 73% of them received a poor score on the effectiveness of their spaces. This means that they don't currently have the space or the spaces aren't the right size for 21st century learning. If we consider our K-8 schools, however, 64% have good or excellent facility scores. This means that we have a lot of solid buildings that with some repair or renovation can become great buildings, but by and large, the bricks and mortar are fine. Only about 40% of our school buildings are expandable. When we looked at sites and opportunities for building bigger schools, accommodating larger enrollments, there are only a subset of schools in our district that can grow in terms of the size of the space that they have. We will need to consider how this plays into our plans to create 21st century modern learning spaces and to accommodate the students that we know will be coming to the Boston Public School System.
The information that Chief Dorsey just laid out has been used to help us develop 10 design principles, and these principles will guide our way forward as we look to design our buildings and our system for 21st century education. The slide that you're seeing right now shows 5 that we thought were very critical in that they starkly illustrate the potential transformative decisions that can be made through our process collaboratively as we begin to look at our buildings together. And they suggest that we should explore several things, including the following. So this includes strategies for modernizing and locating school buildings where families live and are choosing to go to school. Again, special attention needs to be given to East Boston, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury, where we estimate the greater proportion of BPS students will live. These are the places where some of the deepest investments in modernizing BPS school buildings and infrastructure will need to be made. Note that wiggle room is left for opportunistic but thoughtful and careful construction and upgrade projects outside of these target neighborhoods. However, more opportunistic projects should not come at the expense of equity, nor should they be in violation of the educational vision and other important planning principles laid out in the BuildBPS report. We also want to make certain that we locate elementary programs in buildings built to support elementary learners. The same holds true for high schools. Right now we have some high schools located in elementary buildings where classrooms are smaller and buildings are difficult to equip with the tools that our high school students need. We've learned that there is not a lot of excess capacity in the district and therefore not a lot of swing space to temporarily accommodate school programs while we undertake major renovations. We will have to work with communities to develop thoughtful relocation strategies for schools and begin our renovation and upgrade work in some of the neighborhoods where excess capacity does exist. Our high school portfolio probably best illustrates the kinds of citywide changes we need to explore. Many of our students are traveling very far to get to their high school, and so we need to think about these things as we want to optimize geographic distribution of our high schools. Where we're going from here is to begin a strong and collaborative process with all of our stakeholders, students, families, and community, to begin envisioning our buildings and our educational programming. We are asking school leaders to discuss the BuildBPS report and the reports for their specific schools within their school community, specifically looking at the school site council and school parent council. We are also hosting a series of information sessions for the months of April and May to provide additional information and opportunities to ask questions and dig deeper into the report. for all of our community members. Our next phase in the engagement process is really to work collaboratively with the community to generate ideas. We'll be coming out in May and June of each year to talk about the information that we have, what's changed, what are the challenges, where do we need to be going, and we will generate ideas collectively. Those ideas will then be brought back to the city in the Office of School Building for the months of August and October for them to really look at all of these collective ideas, to synthesize them, and to think about the feasibility of the options that have been offered. We'll also be looking at the alignment with the educational vision. We will then return back to you and the community for the months of November through January to talk about how do we prioritize the projects of those that are feasible, how do we begin to prioritize them and determine which ones really should move forward. So after prioritizing all of the projects, we will then bring them back to the city to be placed in the capital budget. We're looking forward to this very collaborative process of really generating ideas for the future of our city and our students with the entire BPS community. Thank you for joining our webinar. We hope that you enjoyed it and found it very informative. We invite you to continue following our progress on BuildBPS at www.buildbps.org. Thank you.